Hello, Andrew Hebard here with the Archiflower channel, Regenerative Omegas for a Regenerative Planet. And today I'm really pleased to be with Vicki Nichols Goldstein, founder and director of the Inland Ocean Coalition. Vicki, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm looking forward to this great conversation. Thank you for the invitation.
So just to set the scene, and I know I won't do full justice to your lifelong ocean advocacy activities, but I'll try to cover some of that in there. So just to set the scene for our viewers and listeners today, you gained your master's from Yale in marine policy, I understand, and
Correct.
then you spent part of your career both with NOAA, and this is an acronym that I always manage to get trip over my tongue on, but that for those that don't know it, it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And then after NOAA, you joined Save Our Shores. And during that period of time, you worked in sort of like a multifaceted ocean conservation role, advising and steering policy and input on things such as ocean vessel traffic, designating marine sanctuaries, sustainable seafood production, fisheries management, and plastic pollution. And
To
then,
name a few.
I'm sorry,
I
to,
said
to,
to name a few,
to
correct.
name a few. And then it sounds as though the call of the mountains got you, and you moved to Colorado, where you established the Colorado Ocean Coalition in 2011, which became the Inland Ocean Coalition in 2017. Does that sound
I
about
think
right?
I think you nailed it. Yes, that was the very accurate Reader's Digest of my life.
Well, excellent. Well, the most important thing to glean out of all of that, most of it is, all of it is very important, but the fact that you're a lifelong ocean advocate and conservation is what I really wanted to dig into today. So, could you share with us a little bit about the vision and the mission for the Inland Ocean Coalition, and particularly, what was your inspiration for founding it and establishing it?
As you mentioned, my whole life has really been around ocean protection, ocean policy, advocacy, and I was able to achieve that, except with this one situation, which was I married this really handsome guy I met in grad school. He ended up getting a job here at CU in Colorado, and we moved our family here. So my inspiration for starting it is I'm an ocean gal and I land in Boulder, Colorado. And what else can I do other than start an organization which has a land to sea ethic? Because I spent about a year after we moved here thinking, I'll just grab a job with another organization who's doing this. I mean, it makes so much sense to tie what's happening inland to the ocean. So I spent a year looking around, and there wasn't an organization that did that. So I thought, well, this might be an opportunity to explore this concept that I had when I worked both for NOAA and when I was running Save Our Shores. And that was, how do you engage people who go to the ocean on holiday or maybe move inland? How do you keep them engaged? Because when you think about all of the heavy lifting, most of it is through coastal organizations. And I thought, well, what about all the rest of the world that isn't coastal? How do you get them involved? So I had the chance to explore that. And I've been exploring that for the last 13 years. And there's a lot of answers to that question, but that really is what motivated me. Like, you just don't have to see the ocean to protect it. And really using that concept to spread the word that we all have so many things to offer the ocean in the form of protection and advocacy.
Well, that's great. And what a great solution to having your heart pulled in two different directions by the beautiful ocean and the handsome guy that's now
True.
moved to Colorado. So what a great compromise that is. And talk about creating your own reality or making your own reality out of that. Good for you. So you touched on an area that I'm really curious about, because I personally, I have to either be on the sea, in the sea, or by the sea to function. And I live in a coastal state here in North Carolina. Um, And when the sea affects you like that, it influences so much of the activity, as you say, not just your recreational activity, your vacation plans, but the local community, the economic basis for the state. Weather affects you greatly as well. So how do you engage with the Inland Ocean Coalition? You're working with inland communities who are, by definition, one step, if not many steps, removed from the ocean. Does that present some challenges to get them as engaged as you are as being an ocean advocate?
You know, when I started this 13 years ago, I would, gather people up. We would have blue drinks, or I would bring in speakers, and I would get the most perplexed looks of people. And they'd be like, what's the point? Like, why are we even dealing with this? You're 1,000 miles from any direction to the ocean. What do we have to do with the ocean? So it's taken a long time, I think, before people really started to recognize that we live on one planet, and most of that planet is covered by ocean. So it's gotten easier, but in the beginning it was actually comical and frustrating at the same time, because people didn't get it. They were like, I can't see the ocean. The ocean has nothing to do with me. But with all of the media and the news and discussions about climate change, weather, warming of the oceans, more rains, more floods, people eating seafood, the transportation system is really increased. They find themselves, in essence, very much connected to the ocean. But it has been a journey to actually get people to come together with that. And for example, we had a meeting last night, and a number of people, we had like 30 people there talking about sunscreens and impacts to freshwater ecosystems, ocean ecosystems. We've done plastic pollution seminars, and now I think people are really understanding that, yeah, we are connected, but it still has been a challenge. And I have to say, it still is. Not everybody is as excited about the ocean and ocean engagement than I am, but I feel like our community is growing, and not just in Colorado, throughout the inland states. And with our education programs, we're now international. So I'm seeing a lot of hope as far as new engagement with people.
Because one of the, and I don't know if this is a, I shouldn't say a strap line, but I'll call it a strap line because I can't think of anything better at the moment. But I think one of the strap lines of the Inland Ocean Coalition is you don't have to see the ocean to protect it. And you make such an important and such a valid point about how I think there's a much greater awareness about how interconnected we are. And the actions, as you say, maybe, gosh, maybe 10 years ago, ocean temperature, people didn't even give a second thought other than, oh, that's a little bit cold to jump in this one, or isn't it warm in the Med? But now I think we're all aware of the impacts of a rising ocean temperature and the devastating effects that can have on weather. And I think we're also very much aware of, you only have to go to some places in the world that you would think are so remote and so pristine and so untouched. The beaches are littered with plastic. Um, and it's the consequence of what we're doing in non uh, seaboard states and countries. The consequence of our actions, even throwing stuff away, are becoming apparent and affecting communities half a world away. So that understanding of connectivity, I think, is important and continues to grow.
Yeah. We just went on a dive trip. My husband jokes that I need to be dipped into the ocean numerous times a year, which is actually very true. But we went diving in Raja Ampat, and it's a remote island in Indonesia. And after you get to a particular area, it's a 5-hour boat trip to get to this dive spot. And it's gorgeous, and the biodiversity is amazing. So many fish. But to your point, on the boat trip out and in some of the dives, you can see plastic floating around. And we are incredibly remote in this area, but it's everywhere. And so, whether we're talking about plastic reduction or the connection between fossil fuels and plastic and proper disposal, it really is all tied together. And you can go to the far corners of the world and see human impacts on the ocean. And so there's just so many things we need to understand, and how we really need to connect the dots so then we can become educated and really change our ways to improve not just the environment, the ocean environment, but pretty much the whole darn planet, because you can't really separate one from the other very effectively.
No, and we can't shrug our shoulders and say it's not our problem. Because A, it is our problem, and B, I bet we help create the problem. We may not like to admit it, but the chances are we help create the problem as well. So,
Yes,
um,
big
so,
chance.
so could you share with us some of the key initiatives or projects that you are sort of spearheading with the Inland Ocean Coalition?
Absolutely. So one project that I've started, my gosh, probably 12 years ago, and it has continued in various forms, has been our Inland Ocean Ambassador training program. And with that, we train people who are interested in being leaders in their community. And we bring in speakers, we talk about a whole variety of things, kind of depending on the session, anything from deep sea mining, plastic pollution reduction, sunscreens. They go through the training and then they become volunteers, and then we create opportunities for them to do things in their community. So for example, we have, great volunteers in upstate New York who frequently do dive cleanups in the Great Lakes and really are engaged with getting people out there to do cleanups, a variety of things. We have people who are in Arizona working, tabling on sustainable seafood. We have people in Roatan who are helping to ban sunscreen. So it's become this international community of over 300 volunteers feeling empowered to do things. And some of these are small things, but they are examples of people active in their communities engaging others to really try to bring about change and positive change. So that's one of our programs that I really love. And then another is a very specific project on petrochemical sunscreens. And we are trying to ban them in Roatan with the help of the dive community and with local NGOs on the ground. And we picked Roatan because there was already people there. We had volunteers, but there were NGOs who said, we want to partner and do this because so many people from Canada and North America come down to go diving. They put all of these chemicals on. They go into our ocean. Our reef is very, very close. And we now know that these chemicals, whether it's oxybenzone, octinoxate, avobenzone, they impact the DNA and cause coral bleaching. They cause blindness in some larval fish. They impact sea urchins. I mean, it does all kinds of terrible things. And because their reef is so close and it's so economically important to them, with the diving community and with proper fisheries management, they're seeing a decline in their healthy reef. So they really want to do something about that. So we've been actively engaged in that particular regional location, but at the same time, we put together a large educational program on these are the bad things in chemical sunscreens, these are the alternatives, and this is how you can change it in your community. So we've seen successes in Hawaii. We've partnered with communities there to ban a couple of those chemical ingredients. So we're continuing on with partnerships to really try to, what I call the low-hanging fruit. It's not like climate change where it can be so overwhelming, like what can I do? It's simply being aware of the ingredients and switching out from one bottle to the next. So I think it's a really exciting project, and I see a lot of enthusiasm around that.
I think from a point of view of you say we're kind of inundated with almost it is overwhelming, and you could get incredibly pessimistic about the state of the climate if you think, and you think this is almost too big an issue to tackle, too big a problem for me to even get my arms around. But when you break it down into an example like the sunscreen and having reef-safe sunscreens and educating people, and you think that actually is a very effective strategy. And it's also something you can own yourself and see the results. So good for you. I'm interested, Vicki, to know from a sunscreen point of view, is there any compelling reason now to include these petrochemicals in sunscreens, or is it a case of we don't think it's broke, therefore don't fix it, let's just carry on with what we're doing? Or can you now get comprehensive UV protection without using these chemicals?
Well, it's interesting. I've been working with a leading scientist who actually has been working on this topic for years and has been very instrumental in the education from a scientific point of view. And I guess there's kind of two things. One, there's protective clothing that you can use, and hats, which is probably the best thing. Wear a shirt when you go out, go swimming. But they have found that if you use basically a titanium dioxide or a zinc oxide sunscreen, which is really a physical barrier, then that can be super effective. And you really do not need all of these chemicals that are in these sunscreens. And there are more and more new products that are on the market that don't leave you like the old lifeguards, with the white noses.
Mm-hmm.
You can get tinted sunscreens. I mean, I put tinted sunscreen on every day. So there are many products that you can use, and you don't need a lot of them. And you just need to be conscientious and aware of, making sure that you're protecting yourself out there. Because obviously no one is encouraging us to go out without any protection, with the sun and sunscreen and cancer situations. But it's about doing it in a smart way. And when you think about the ocean, it's already impacted due to all the things we just mentioned, warming, climate change, in many cases, overfishing. When you just add another layer of stress, it really just weakens the system. So it's kind of like, let's try to take that stress out as we also work on all of these other things. And, with your ahi flower, you're addressing the fisheries issue. We're addressing the fisheries issues. So it really, I think, is going to take a multi-pronged approach. And this one is just a good, easy step, but it doesn't mean it's the only step. So it's exciting to have partners, because if you're trying to deal with a multitude of topics, you really don't want to do it alone. And so this is another thing that I've really loved about the Inland Ocean Coalition. You've got your volunteers, you have your partners, you've got your policy partners, your business communities, the scientific community. So it really does have a holistic approach to trying to address, all of the challenges that we sometimes get overwhelmed with. But I like having some positive things that we can do that feel good and feel easy.
Absolutely. I like yourself, I try to travel to different places and see different communities, and particularly those that are part of the ocean. You talk about Roatan, which is stunning, and my hobbies take me to places where I fly fish. And what I've seen over, and I'm living proof of this, over just the last few years, is the move away, and this is completely counterintuitive, but the move away from sunscreen to sun protective clothing, and how much you have to, beforehand it was minimalistic clothing and chemicals to protect you, and now it's everything from arm, leg sleeves, long sleeve shirts, buffs, hats, etc. And it's driven by particularly the fishing guides that I've spent many days, weeks, months with, protecting the oceans from chemicals. So it's having an effect, and it's having effects in some of these places that probably need to have the greatest effect. So you mentioned ahi flour. Thank you for that for a call out, and it's what I wanted to move into next in my sort of discussion with you. Is back in my formative years, I had this had to make a decision: do I turn left or turn right? And turning left was going to be a marine biologist, and turning right was going to be an agriculturist. And I turned right, and I often wonder, gosh, did I make the right decision? And I definitely did, but I didn't think that 40 years later that would become a full circle, and that going down the marine biology route would have actually got me to where I am today with the agricultural route. And that is that we're trying to develop plant-based, regeneratively grown alternatives to fish oil. And as I mentioned, spending a lot of time on the ocean, I've seen in my lifetime such a change in ocean abundance, such a big change. And not just the reduction of abundance of life, but an increase in the abundance of non-life, like plastics that we talked about. And that has been my calling, like a bit of a clarion call to say, what can we do? And in our little way, we're trying to home in on the importance of fishery management and not taking such large amounts of fish out of the ocean for an extractive and depletive industry, and growing something regeneratively on the land to to replace omega-3s. I'd really value your thoughts on how an important contribution that is from your knowledge and your career in terms of how you've seen ocean abundance change, fisheries management, and that sort of thing. Are we having an impact?
I think that I'm very happy that people are starting to talk about fishery management. Um, we have really overfished our ocean tremendously. I mean, we have so many examples. You look at the 90% of our large species are no longer there. You've seen the collapse of the fisheries up in Georges Bank. We're taking too many fish. And so I was very excited when we first met a number of years ago that you were looking at ways to provide the omega-3s in a way that doesn't impact the fisheries that are out there. And in talking with a number of people, Dr. Pauly, for example, who is a fisheries expert, one of the challenges we have is to really define how many fish we're taking out. And he has discovered that there are probably 30% of the amount of fish we are taking out through fishing industries aren't even accounted for. So the numbers that we have really aren't accurate. And we do know that we are really impacting fisheries internationally, and that they call it the reduction industry, which is taking, whether it's krill or the Peruvian as anchovetas, similar to the anchovies.
Yeah.
It's an enormous amount of fish that are coming out, both for fish meal that goes towards, feeding chickens and ag, and then also for the supplement industry. And it is an enormous volume of fish that are being taken out of the ecosystem. And that is impacting the animals that actually need to eat those fish, whether it's whales, other fish, seals. So having an alternative, I think, is absolutely critical. And I myself take the ahi flour because I stopped taking fish oil years ago because I was feeling like it was kind of a waste of these beautiful resources. And so many of these resources could go towards actually eating the whole product. So you're getting the nutrients of the whole animal, and you're not necessarily having them brought out of the ocean and processed into these little capsules that people are taking. So I think more and more people need to be aware of this extraction and reductive industry that is really negatively impacting our oceans, and start looking for alternative ways. And so, like I said, ahi flour is one, but the other idea is just to be aware of eating low on the food chain and being aware of what you're putting in your body, and trying to stick with small healthy fish bivalves and not your larger animals, in which many of these supplements are derived from, like tuna. Like I don't eat tuna. I don't eat high on the food chain. So I think making the connection between the supplements that people are taking, what's happening with the actual numbers of fish in the ocean, and how oftentimes we don't really account for the amount of fish we're taking out, really needs to be all wrapped up into an educational framework that the ocean is not just there for us to either dump our stuff in or extract for our personal use. It's a whole thriving ecosystem that deserves to be protected for the value of that ecosystem and just to keep our planet healthy. Because we all know that without a healthy ocean that's functioning and doing well and having enough food for all of the animals, we're not going to survive. Because without a healthy ocean, there really is no life. And the fact that it's the lungs of our planet, 50% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean and the plants. That's something to really think about. And that's when people say, well, what's the big deal about an ocean? I'm like, yeah, you like to live, you like to breathe, something worth taking care of.
So well put, and it brings to mind that picture of Earth from outer space, the bright, vibrant blue color of the oceans, and just how significant they are as the overall planet compared to the landmass. And unfortunately, we are in many ways disassociated from that and not understanding kind of what is happening. It's like out of sight, out of mind. But you make a very valid point about the reduction industry and the unreported catch and the bycatch and whatever else. We're not doing the oceans many great favors. One of the most memorable things that I've seen, and it's almost if you could bottle this up, and I know it's on various documentaries. You can go to The Blue Planet by Sir David Attenborough and watch these sort of things. But years and years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I was off the coast of Mexico in the Pacific Ocean, and there were bait balls upon bait balls there. And for those of you that haven't seen a bait ball, when you see this massive shoal of sardines or anchovita that are being fed on by tuna and mahi-mahi and seabirds and dolphins and sperm whales, the whole ecosystem is there right in front of you. And you realize that this is the food source that they rely on. This is everything to those animals. And when we just net them out of the ocean, we leave this gaping void to say, where did my food source go? And it's something that until you realize it's like somebody coming and taking a huge swath of our food, our fruit or our vegetables away from us, saying, where are we going to forage next? So yeah, very, very vivid recollections of that.
I also think it's kind of interesting that we call it seafood and not food from the sea.
Food from the sea.
It is food, but it's not our. I mean, so many people rely on it, especially in some of the different cultures around the world. But I think we've gotten so used to, like, it's seafood. It's for us. We can take as much as we want, and not really think about, is that really the right orientation that we need to have? We should be very selective of what we eat from the ocean, or not at all. And I mean, Dr. Sylvia Earle does not eat any food from the sea, and then all the way up to people who, just a variety. I'm not making any judgments, but there should be a conscientious approach to what you choose from the sea to consume, and be aware that it's a gift. It's not necessarily just for our taking, and that has to be shared with all the other animals. And having that awareness, I think if we just were able to promote that a little bit more and people were more conscientious, we would be in a much better state in ocean protection and ocean conservation. It's just a mind shift. And I feel like the more I'm out there talking with people, especially young people, there's I guess I'm saying I'm feeling a little optimistic, because I see there is a shift of thinking with people coming up who are going to be our new leaders that, yeah, we have not done a good job and we need to change our perspective. So
Yeah.
I am feeling like there is some level of optimism that we have, that I have, which really allows me to continue doing my work because, when you're inundated with all the bad news, you really have to hold on to some gems just to keep you going and keep you, going back to
Absolutely.
the
And
thing.
people have to see your optimism and your belief in it, because otherwise, you're a leader. You're the torch carrier. So you have to believe that your torch is going to burn strongly. And I again, as I mentioned, I live here in North Carolina, and I fish on the coast here. And the the decline that I've seen in our fisheries, and I'm kind of proud that I will go and catch a flounder every now and again and eat it, or I'll catch something else. But it's everything that I catch is to replace something that we would have bought from a supermarket,
Mhm.
and I see the ocean as almost like open source nutrition for everybody. You can harvest clams, you can harvest oysters, you can harvest mussels, you can harvest fish, you can harvest seaweed. And depending on where you are in the world, there's all sorts of other things you can harvest there. And it's a little bit like going into a forest and picking berries. It's open source nutrition where you say this should be a resource for everybody to enjoy from if they want to. But it seems as though it's getting concentrated into a fewer and fewer hands that are dominated by greed and money, and then politics come into it as well. And so I think the work that you're doing at the Inland Ocean Coalition is so important to bring awareness to that. But also, I love the idea that you have now 300, do you say, ambassadors that you're training to go and put the word out there as well, and do that in inland communities. I think cleaning up the Great Lakes and helping people understand again the connectivity between what happens here will affect the oceans ultimately. So I really applaud the work that you're doing in that area, Vicki. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
What does the sort of the future look like for the Inland Ocean Coalition? Any projects or initiatives that are really sort of piquing your interest, or excuse the pun, floating your boat?
Floating my boat. Yes. Well, I'm really feeling like we can go someplace with this sunscreen initiative. So we've got some partners in Texas who are working on it. Again, we hope to be successful in Honduras. Um, I think this is the beginning of really helping people understand. So working on the sunscreen component, but also we're spending a lot of time with the dive industry, dive shops, with the leadership of DEMA, trying to bring in a strong conservation conservation message. Divers and snorkelers and people who are on the ocean, seeing the changes, there's so much potential. And I think historically, the dive industry has not been a leader in helping with those conservation ethics. It's been go in, dive, then go get a grouper sandwich. It's kind of like, wait a minute. Haven't you noticed a reduction in groupers in the large sizes? So it's trying to really make that connection. So we've started that many years ago, and we're continuing to work forward. And then also continuing with our Ocean Ambassador training, providing additional opportunities, networking opportunities for those volunteers to keep their momentum and their energy. And I mean, I have a vision, that we can get out and have volunteers in every state in the United States and in Canada and around the world, and in partnership, not just us, but in partnership with other people who share that message. So I guess my dream really would be that people recognize that they have the ability to make a positive difference. They know some of the things that they can do, and that everybody just pick one or two things, whether it's voting for people who are running to protect the ocean and climate, or carrying your single use, or excuse me, carrying your water bottle or bags or picking up trash. I mean, there's something for everybody. And I think if people feel like they're empowered to make a positive difference, it can be an astounding change for the world. And so we're just going to keep plugging along, being advocates, educators, and really providing a light for people who think that they are helpless, to basically say, no, nobody is helpless. Get out there and do something positive.
Well, you give such a compelling and really uplifting message, Vicky. It's wonderful. How can people help you achieve that vision? So on this podcast, we'll put a link to the Inland Ocean Coalition website, and people can use that as a resource, can they, to learn more? And also, how it seems like so much of this can be, I wouldn't say solved, but we can make a big difference by making mindful decisions. And two or three things that you've said really struck home to me, like the making mindful decisions about chemical-free sunscreen. That is almost a no-brainer. The other one is eating low on the food chain. I love that. Thinking about the water purifiers, the filter feeders, the oysters, the mussels, the clams. Lower down on the food chain rather than bluefin tuna and things like that.
Our
All
little
of
panda
those
of the ocean.
yeah, absolutely, our panda of the ocean. So, making mindful decisions like that are important. How can people and our listeners today dial into that and become more, more informed, better informed?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. So we are launching our Inland Ocean Ambassador Training Program in a couple of weeks. So that information is on our website. So you can apply to be an ocean ambassador. We also have the petrochemical sunscreen petition on our website. So the more people who sign it, the more we can get engagement. And then we'd like to present the petition to the municipality in Roatan. So looking for big engagement. Of course, donating to the Inland Ocean Coalition to keep us alive and keep our programs going and our staff taken care of is also very important. And then signing up for our newsletter so you can get informed of different things that are happening and volunteer. We have people who write blogs for us, interview us on different podcasts to help spread the message, and then just make a commitment that you're going to do something great. And even though we might not know directly, it'll start spreading, and I think it'll help all of us.
Wonderful. Vicky, well, I wish you all the best in your mission and achieving your vision. Please keep up the good work. I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing and your ambassadors in the Inland Ocean Coalition. And it's been lovely chatting with you. And thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.